Hello, everyone. This is Derek Newman still, and I'm here today talking with poet, performer, and just general brilliant person, Charlie Petch. Welcome, Charlie.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be with you here, Derek.
So great to meet
Looking
you.
so good too, by the way.
You too, buddy. So fabulous.
What?
You radiate fabulousness.
I was just wandering around in this shirt and everything. Just wandering around.
Like you do every day, right?
Yeah, this is how I roll. Just at home alone.
So I'm wondering if just to start us out, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and just give us a sense of who you are.
Sure, thank you. So I am Charlie Petch. My pronouns are they and them. I'm a transmasculine person that also is non-binary, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist. This past year, I've put out a book by Brick Books, Why I Was Late, a libretto called Medusa's Children with Opera QTO, which is a queer and trans run opera company. And Yeah, I'm just about to work on a really interesting hybrid show with a theater and then Instagram Live and like really exploring what hybrid theater can be. Because now that we know we can do it, let's make it awesome with Lemon Tree Creations. And Yeah, my hot dog play went on too, and I'm just working on the de-escalation workshop part of it, and then it'll be part of Theater Past Mariah in another season. So I am busy and happy with work. Work is incredible.
I love that you've got so many different projects on the go. It's just so beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, people are like ADD is terrible, and I'm like, is it?
It's my superpower.
My superpower. You just gotta like redo your whole life so that you can just be ADD all the time.
Exactly. I love it.
Mm.
So now for the big questions.
Oh,
Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences of Peterborough Pride in the past? And can you
yeah.
tell us a little bit, because I know you've done some performance work for us too, as part of the Queer Collisions Conference, for example,
Oh,
and
yeah.
some workshops. You've really like brought community together for Peterborough-Nogojiwanong Pride.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you. I guess I think I was actually part of the first Peterborough Pride. I'm from Peterborough, I should mention. So, having Pride in my city is huge, right? Like I was there till I was 5, then came to Toronto, and then came back for Trent University. Because people kept telling me don't go to that university, it's bisexual, lots of bisexuals go. And I was like, number one, like Trent or basically nothing else. So I went back, and yeah, I really Trent and Nogojiwanong, Peterborough had a wonderful theater community. So that's how I really came back into my own hometown. But yeah, it's not a easy place to be queer. Certainly, from friends I have, I know it's very much not an easy place to be a person of color, much less to be a person of color who's also queer. So it's really spectacular that we have Pride and that we have one day where maybe we feel normal and safer than usual walking down the street together, and that means so much. Over the years, I've done performances at the Garnet, at Trent, the Queer Collisions, and just really bringing like and just showing up and being there and carrying banners and being proud. It's been wonderful to share. I'm normally a spoken word artist and a musician, so over the years I've shared a lot of spoken word and music at Peterborough Pride and Nogojiwanong Pride, and yeah, it's been a real honor to bring that to my hometown.
That's fantastic. And you're a saw poet as well, which I
Mm,
really enjoy your use of the saw. I think it's very cool.
thank you.
Sorry, just random compliments need to come in sometimes.
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can do the whole Ave Maria on the saw if anybody needs that for any reason.
Like
We all
you
need that
do.
for all the reasons. Yeah. We all need that all the time. All the time.
Exactly. Exactly. Are there any particular memories that stand out from past Peterborough Prides? Like, what was it like, especially at the first couple of Prides? Because, like, I remember the group of protesters that showed up to our first couple of Prides, and like they
Hmm.
showed up with all of the nasty signs and everything else. But that quickly faded.
Yeah. 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 I mean, they had such a good time with us. They're like, turns out I'm gay, and that's why I'm carrying this fucking sign. Well, I mean, you can only hope. But yeah, like once we, it became less of a small little niche thing that we were doing. And even like it's so hard to like there's no real queer center in Peterborough, so like getting the news out there about Pride was, our first hurdle. And then, to think of being out and proud in a city that, attacks you is a lot. So yeah, it was really intimidating, and it was really, but at the same time it's like this is why it's necessary, right? Like because I
Exactly.
don't want the next kids to show up and think that they don't belong, that it's okay for this to be happening. So I think once we got our numbers up there, and then it became like, well, we'll just go back to doing the March for Jesus and stop yelling at all the queers. Uh, I don't know. It's a lot to have a town with a police foundation
Yeah,
school, and it's a rural place. It's nearby so much ruralness. It's a city with so much ruralness, and there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of church that gets in the way and everything. So yeah, to like watch from where it started and then what it's become, which is so big and huge, and like taking over the park and everything, and people on stilts, and yeah, it's just beautiful to show that it's a peaceful, at the heart of it, it never needed to be a protest, like I mean it need to be a protest, it need to be a riot, it needs to be all these things, but at the root of it, it never should have been. It's just people celebrating who they are, and saying we deserve equal human rights, and we deserve to walk around in our downtown at least one day a fucking year, and feel that we can be our full selves. So yeah, it's been amazing to watch what it started as and what it's become.
it's amazing to see, especially the way it's affected younger generations. Like,
Hmm.
there's those of us older queers, and we're sort of like still on the edge. Like, at any point in time, someone could throw a rock at us.
Yeah.
And then the young queers are just like, woo!
Yes. It's such a funny divide, I find, because like as someone like you and I probably grew up in a time where there's no queer clubs in our schools, and watching people be free that are a younger generation, it's so hard to like have the concept that you can do that, or that you should expect that, like the amount of expectation. I love that they have that expectation. Sometimes as a arts organizer it's too much, because they're like, I never, like we didn't even know the word queer, we didn't know anything but slurs,
Exactly.
and we hid, and that's called going to the drama department and the AV club.
And library. Don't forget the library.
Oh, the library. Oh my gosh, I love the library. No one
All of our
asks
little,
volunteers what they're hiding from, It's a line in a library poem I actually have.
oh, amazing.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I forgot. Yeah, the library is also a queer club.
Yeah, the art room, the drama room, the
Mm-hmm.
library. We had all of our little hidey holes around the school.
Yeah, yeah, the Huli Hut in the woods. Yeah, yeah. So to watch people be out and proud, it's still, And so I think we all get like a little culture shock with it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And when it happens outside of Pride, you're like, whoa, my
Yeah,
goodness,
absolutely.
go youth, Thank
Yeah.
goodness, because if there weren't youth out there, I wouldn't, youth and our trans ancestors, we wouldn't have the language that we have right now and know ourselves how we do. Because you and I have both, since we've known each other, come into our own
Non-binary selves.
non-binary selves. I love it.
I mean, at least we discovered the words for it. Before it was just like, I don't know, I don't fit in.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a weirdo. Yeah, a weirdo. One of the guys. What do you call that? Oh my god, tomboy. Yeah, yeah.
I was to say a flaming femme.
And you were a flaming femme. Yeah, are a flaming femme. Yeah,
Exactly. I appreciate my flames.
yeah. And femme being a word. It's so
Right?
good.
It's so
Yeah.
beautiful, especially since we live in such a femme-phobic society. It's so great to
Yes.
claim.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah.
So for you, what does pride mean overall? When you hear the term pride, what kinds of ideas come up? What feelings, what inspirations come out?
Um, I think for me, for pride, pride means to me like community. Um, it means standing, like being together. It means accessibility around pride because like no one left behind, right? When it's
Exactly.
pride. And it means a riot. It means a fight. It means it's not over. It means fuck the police. And it means just like I keep thinking about this, like it's just like I'm starting a little, but like a chance to feel normal for a second, to be around people who are like you, to be around people who ask you your pronouns or already know them, and to be in a space even just for a little while. It's this year it was so hard, because we've had 2.5 years
Yeah.
shut in. And so when I actually I just got a little award for this trans march poem I wrote
Oh,
from Arc
congratulations.
magazine. Yeah, and it's just this like moment in time of like, like I was going with my friend, another Polly Vernon, who was part of the Silver Hearts, wonderful drummer and musician, and we're doing this thing called Trans and Trades, and she brought the thing. So like going into construction or film environments and talking to people about trans identity
Yeah.
is something that we're pushing for. And to walk with her, and she's been out since the beginning of the pandemic, and all of these trans and non-binary people and two-spirit people who have been out during the pandemic but haven't been in a community environment, and maybe they've been to the trans march before but not how they are now. And like the puppy energy was, it was so good, just like everybody just like barreling into each other, and us also with masks on and being careful. And there's just so much more. I just love queer people so much. Right, like
It's
queer
so
people who fight for inclusion and fight for each other.
it's so tough being separated because of the pandemic, because so much of our energy as queer folks comes from that sense of community. It comes from
Yes.
our little collection of outsiders, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when we get them all into a room together, it's so magic. Yeah,
Absolutely.
much less taking over a park in downtown Peterborough.
So powerful, right? When we take over that space and turn it into a queer space, like just
Yeah.
watching what happens in that space. Because one of the things that stands out for me is watching the way that kids get interacting with like performers and things in the park, and the way
Hmm.
that there's a sense of community that way too, that there's a sense of
Yeah.
familial community.
Yeah, the little kitties, and they're just like, wearing rainbows and everything. And like, it doesn't matter how they identify. They're just there to
Exactly.
celebrate and to be a child, to be open, like
Yeah.
to be open, like I can be queer, I can be bi, I can be pan, I can be non-binary, I can be all of these things. Like this is all open, like, thinking, what a joy, what a joy
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, and I see my friends' little kids, or like,
Yeah.
even kids I've known as, little babies growing up into like, the queer youth of today. It's just, woo, it's the best. They say
Absolutely.
1 in 10, but please don't.
Way more than that. Way more.
Yeah, 1 in 10 of people who were admitting, and I think we need to update that. I think we need to update that for gender.
Absolutely, we do.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I was going to say also, you mentioned briefly accessibility and inclusion. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about accessibility at Pride and the need for inclusion, particularly for disabled queer folks? Because
Yeah.
disabled queer folks are often left out.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, like, I think we've it's funny because like we're still calling it the trans march, or dykes on bikes, or that sort of thing, where we're like, yeah, we're still using ableist language in there. So I'm hoping that that will change because we can't all march, right? And I think, and like, how do we create these spaces? Like, when I'm in Toronto, and Toronto Pride, with the Dyke March, they had like an hour of standing in the sun, before they could move, and that normally it starts right on time. Um, and so in that hour, they lost people's, your health can become an emergency in an hour like that. You can have, done everything to get to this march, like wheel trans and everything, and then to like have no shade, or or yeah, like not everybody, we're not there yet. Certainly we're not there yet. um and I think, we just got to keep working towards getting there. And then we can truly be proud of Pride, because right now I know we're leaving people behind. I know that, there's a time in Pride when I have to leave because of flickering lights. I can't um hardly move when it happens. So it's it mean, I like I like a small Pride because that feels there's so much more opportunity for inclusion. Whereas Toronto Pride, like the big Pride Day, it doesn't feel like it's for us at all. It feels like it's corporate sponsored garbage. And the ideal, queer, it's like, here's the queers you want, mainly white, very able-bodied, mainly young, people who can stand outside for 2.5 hours,
Mhm.
and be in immense crowds where their safety is threatened, through, never mind the pandemic. Some people just, you can't be in a crowd if you're immunocompromised.
Exactly.
um yeah, and I think the pandemic is teaching us so much more about how to be inclusive
Yeah.
too, and I really hope that carries forward.
Well, and how great would it be if disabled members of a parade actually set the pace? Like an
Yes,
like
out front.
yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Center accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, even, yeah, I didn't think about that. The pace of Pride could be too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of interesting work that we have to do. What are some
Mhm.
things that you'd like to see in the future for Pride? What are some things you think like, here's where we need to go, or here's what we need to avoid, perhaps even? Because Peterborough's Pride is pretty small, and like you said, that's a benefit in some ways because
Yeah.
we actually have to listen to everyone instead of just centering this particular white, able-bodied, um,
Mhm.
gendered, like a young kind of body.
Yeah. I think, putting people in places of power, that aren't white and able-bodied is like number one moving forward. Somebody who's lived with like, mobility, disability, you know, that should be who is doing the consult and who is setting up, how Pride can work for them. Because if Pride's gonna work for them, Pride's gonna work for like everybody in a much better way. Having, Black and Indigenous people, Asian people in those power positions as well, because we can walk around Peterborough in a different way as white people
Mhm.
than Black and Indigenous and either, well, BIPOC people can be in that space. So we need to know what that looks like for them, which to me means zero police presence. And if Pride needs to put together a community sort of security, I don't even like security details, but like, we don't need straight security people there either. And blocking washrooms, what do the washrooms look like, right? Like, can you actually get a wheelchair in there? Do we need to have uh you know um do we need, does Pride need to provide caregivers for some people that day, because not everybody's got care as well. So really, like, I think it's disability and BIPOC forward,
Mhm.
because there's things I don't see um that happen that I won't have a concept of unless that person has already made it's we're very lucky to be living in a time where we're aware of this more, where those conversations are happening. So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. So I should mention this year's
Mhm.
theme for Pride is joy and resistance. So
Oh,
bringing
it's
those two together. And so I have to ask you, I'll ask about each part of that.
mm,
What does queer joy mean to you? What does it mean to have queer joy, to be full of that jouissance?
mm. So I like to think about joy and pain as being on the same, teeter totter. So, I think, and I know that as I get older and as I experience more pain, that my joy has changed, that my joy has become immense, and overwhelming and beautiful in ways that I couldn't access it uh, before I experienced more pain. So, like, queer joy to me is such a revolution, right? Because it's like taking all that pain and fighting the other end of it, and fighting, also this beautiful universe that or when queer joy is upheld, I think that moment comes back to you in times of pain as well, because like, it helps me to think that way. So queer joy to me is just like being together and being in a environment that feels like our environment. I don't want safe as such a safe doesn't actually happen. So like in our environment, like what that looks like, and having that be accessible um and not centering, also there's ableism and stuff like that, and there's also ageism, and like just celebrating that queers are, people that come out in their 70s, right? And like, and it's yeah, like, what a joy it is. And it's so funny because I feel like you have to translate a lot of that joy with communities outside of queer communities to like say, no, this is amazing, and like, this is what I love, and this is how I am, and everything's fine. Like, we're normal,
Yeah.
I think queer joy comes out of like, could really thrive more if we were considered normal. I mean, it's fun, sparkles, da, 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 like that, but like, we're normal, everyday, average people, and the more the stigma of like queer fear gets away from us, the better, the more we'll be able to show our joy and truly thrive in it.
I've been noticing as I've aged, joy shows up in many of the same ways as sorrow. Like, for example,
Mm,
when I'm really experiencing a lot of joy, the tears start flowing, like they just start on their own. And
yeah.
it's interesting, right? How we celebrate and how our bodies like react to these amazing moments of joy and
Hmm.
comfort and safety and security, or at least more safety and security than at other times.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah, yeah, and I think, there's like, somebody was saying like, are you happy to me the other day, and I was like, that's just so like, I hate that word. Like, happiness is overrated. I think
Absolutely.
it's something that belongs on a throw pillow. I think it's something that is so heteronormative that I don't even want to like approach it. I'm like, am I like feels too complicated to be happy, you know? But joy, I know what joy feels like.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, my queer happiness is joy instead and pain
Nicely
all at the
said.
same time.
Nicely said. And
Yeah.
you're right, our pain does shape our joy and vice versa. Like our joy gives
Mhm.
us something to survive on in times of pain. Uh,
Yeah.
it lets us recognize that those times of pain are limited as well, that we can eventually have that space again where we're safe, where we're or safer, where we're
Mhm.
happier, where we're even though you're right, happiness is such a yeah, a weak term.
Yeah, it feels that way. It's just been yeah, it's like one of these words that just become nothing after a while to me.
And so
Uh
often happiness means conformity too, right?
yeah, yeah, it's like what does happiness look like, right? And now it's happiness is such a clinical term now as
Absolutely.
well. So it's like you're being, you know, as people who have depression or anxiety disorders, it's like, oh, you're never going to be happy. So you're like, you fucking failed, right? And like that's sort of like that's how I hear happiness is like,
There's a built-in idea of successful happiness or
yes,
happiness.
yeah. But joy is so much more punk, right? And like, so are we.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
speaking of punk things, how about resistance? How do we feel about resistance? What does queer resistance mean for us? Uh,
Hmm.
when you hear the word resistance, what are some of the first things that come up?
Yeah, I guess like queer resistance to me goes beyond how we talk to each other or any like goes beyond the marches and everything. It goes to like how what we call a theater piece, right? Like what we call art. What is, you know, what is you know, acceptable, you know, because we've been so heterosexually framed, like the whole of society has been so heterosexually framed, white framed, you know, like it's like reading you know, I have Tyler Pennick, who's a two-spirit person, wrote a book, wrote his their past poetry book. They, he, she, uh, was had no titles on it, right? And like,
Ooh, I love that.
yeah, so you couldn't tell where one poem ended and the next, and it was, and you know, and they were talking about it like that's an Anishinaabe way of doing poetry, right? And like that's like just being like, you know what, this is my practice, this is my culture's practice, and this is what I'm putting in this book, and like that, like to me, that's like a huge form of resistance, you know,
Yeah,
and like. No, I expect to have the same, you know, I am in the same arena as the rest of Canlit, you know, and like just like, you know, rethinking anything that we've called like, you know, here's how to write a book, right? And like as soon as I read a book that didn't follow those things, I was like, oh, now I understand I can write, you know.
exactly.
But when I'm
Exactly.
looking at Dickens, I don't think I can write, but when I look at, you know, Vonnegut, I'm like, yeah, I can be a writer, right? So I think queer resistance is so pervasive in everything we do, and I love it, you know. And queer resistance is present at almost any fight for human rights
Yeah.
as well. Whether or not you accept us, we're also fighting for human rights, and we'll fight for you. And so, you know, it's you know, I love a good march. I love a good resistance, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think you know, expecting to be treated like a normal human is a form of is a huge form of resistance, and I try and bring that into practice as much as possible.
Even just existing while queer is a form
Yeah,
of resistance, right? Like we're already
yeah,
resisting the narrative of heteronormativity.
yeah, yeah. I mean, me wearing you know, a sleep mask on the subway because of my disability is a form of resistance, you know. It's like I'm willing to be out there and do that and just act like the world should accept me, you know, which is a very white thing, but you know, I don't know. It's the experience I have with it.
Well, I can't help but think about your role as an artist as well. Artists have always been resistant figures, figures that
Mm-hmm.
society rubs on the edges of, that kind of change elements of society just by centering that vision. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so it makes me really think about the power of queer art as a resistance method as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like just it's funny. I got an award this year, the Relit Award, and I keep
Congratulations.
calling. Thank you. And it's about like pushing boundaries, like and I'm reading the Pump, which was the short story one, and like I'm looking at this and I'm thinking like if I'd done my MFA, in today's universities, I might never have written a book that would have gotten that award. So like, being like, again, going back to Kurt Vonnegut, like, he said, if I'm looking for writers, I go to the chemistry, I go to the sciences because that's where, because they haven't been told how to do things,
Exactly.
in anything other than their practice of science, of course. But like, yeah, I think and it's funny because when I talk about the Relit Award, I'll be like, I got an award for being the biggest weirdo in Canada small publishing this year. Hey, and it's
Yeah.
funny because so often straight people will be like, oh no, don't say that, and it's like, what? Like, I'm a proud weirdo. Like, that is not a bad word to me. That is like a celebratory word. So I love having that, I'm like, it's the weirdo award and I got it and I'm gonna call it the weirdo award.
Absolutely.
Cause yeah, when you don't fit in, either you just like chip at yourself until you do fit in, or you're just like, well, fuck it. If people are gonna look at me like I'm a weirdo, I'll just be my total self and push every boundary I can. Because when you do that, there's a little you in all of these audiences that's going to look at that and think that's how I want to do art, or like this, this opens me up, this makes me think I can do this,
Yeah.
or like you said it just how I think, and like I've been told I'm weird about that, and like yeah,
And
the weirdos resistance is so good.
and art shouldn't be around to make people comfortable. It should make them
No.
uncomfortable. It should be
Yeah.
the language of us weirdos. It should be the language of us, like us freaks. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't help
Mm-hmm.
but think about Todd Browning's film Freaks and the lines,
Oh,
one of us, one
na,
of us.
na, na. Yeah.
It's
I
so
love
great.
it. That comes up a lot. Oh my god. Yeah, like the freak show is just like, it's you must have watched Crip Camp.
Yeah, I loved it so much.
Yeah, because like those like little like where they're like, oh, you're the sideshow, blah, 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 like, and I understand the problems of the sideshow, but like same time
Absolutely.
there are people who had community. They had they're capitalizing on what made them different to others and being like, well, why don't you pay me for it, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a different thing than like the poor like victimization, or like to watch them, one of us, like that moment is so like, yeah, that's so great, like you can be like one of these amazing freaks.
Yeah.
um and it's a beautiful tradition, and it's and then in Crip Camp, like, oh my god, like when I think back to just the film of them, and I guess it was in the 70s, in the camps where they're just like, we're fine, like we don't need y'all, and we're having a great old time, and we'll figure it, and we have a few essential needs, but like finally I can be myself, I can do my gibberish, I can relax, right? Like relax and be like what my ability actually is. And then that became a resistance movement, and it's just, oh, I love that shit. Love it so much. It gives me so much hope. Um,
What are
yeah.
some ways that disability and queerness intersect with each other? Because, like for both of us, we're at that intersection, right? Being like
Mm,
trans, non-binary, queer folks that are also disabled means that we exist on this like this uncomfortable sort of intersection of two different identities. Um,
yeah, yeah, we're the party poopers, right? Like, sometimes I feel that way. Sometimes I feel very like, because someone will be like, "Let's go to a restaurant," and I'll be like, well, not that I go in restaurants anymore, but before it's like, well, I can't, like, that light over there, that light over there, like, and you become like, the experience of it is to, yeah, you feel like a problem, you feel like a sore thumb. um
Yeah.
and but when, it was fun, like, I went to queer slow dance, and they wouldn't turn off
Oh, you're
disco
kidding.
ball. Yeah, and they had this like accessibility thing in the front, and it's so funny. 'Cause I'm there. I'm a lighting designer. I'm
Yeah.
there with my brother. Well, my brother in union. We used to be in the film union together, Max.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, all you got to do is like turn off the thing, like it's on your board, but
Yeah.
I can't look while I'm doing this. I'm like, Max can show you, and they're like, no, 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 you can't do it. And we're like, actually, like, you're talking to two people who have done, like, we
Yeah.
know you can because we've worked with lighting boards before, and like all you got to do is stop the spin. And
Exactly.
it's funny how queers work against each other in this, because I ended up having to leave, and it hurt so much when that happened. um
Absolutely.
yeah, because I was like, I'm going to a slow dance, so I'm going to be like myself in a school gym atmosphere. Like,
The kind of
what a take back that is, to
yeah.
have our prom.
I was talking to my therapist about this, and we talked about this idea of nostalgia for what we didn't have. And
Mm,
it makes me think about that experience that you must have been like, this is the chance to have the school dance as a queer person that I would have
yeah,
wanted as a kid. And yet, again, that was shut down because of ableism.
yeah, and like, yeah, it's just so sad. And like, how we do that to each other. It's like, so many people think that, the queer community, that we're all on board with each other, and we're all anti-racist, and we're all like cool, but like, no, we're really not. So like, yeah, so I think I can't remember what you asked me, but here we are. Oh,
This
just
is
about the intersection of queerness and that experience. Yeah,
yeah,
so it's, yeah, it's I like, I guess, like, when I think about, like, even just going downtown and
yeah,
going to buddies, or going out dancing, right? Like, all the queer things that queers are supposed to do, and you can't do them, and then all of a sudden you're not accepted even in your small pocket of society. And the loneliness of that is so, it can be so pervasive sometimes. So
yeah,
um I really, yeah, I'm all for, the disability movement, queer disability movement being amazing. And it's really cool. Queer as Folk, I don't know if you have been paying attention, but it's come back.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and I know Andrew Gurza was on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I can't wait for that, because like Andrew's taught me so much about disability and sex work, disability and affection, and like all of that is just, it's like nobody want to hear about it, and now that we're hearing about it, I'm just like, this is the revolution, right? Like,
Absolutely.
hiring, and since then I've got a few disabled friends who would like a sex worker, and I'm like, there's actual, like, I can find, actual sex workers that
With special
know, yeah, that do, that have, that are in inclusive of and specialists, right? Like, they're specialists with the disabled folks. And
yeah,
yeah, and I think, like, like these words too, right? Like queer and disabled, like, we keep, like, people like, oh no, you can't say that, that's like
mhm,
terrible, blah blah blah. It's like, I've never felt so strong as when I was in Brooklyn for this Woman of the Worlds. I was competing at the time because I thought I was a woman. Whoops. And I couldn't understand why I was so upset the whole time. I'm like, why am I so sad and upset and feeling like I'm left out?
yeah,
um because I'm trans guy. And that was like the last year I was not out.
yeah.
Anyway, there was a invisible disabled people's open mic.
Ooh,
And yeah, and we it was so great. And like the woman who ran it is someone who lives with uh, epilepsy,
Yeah.
and she's just great. She's just like a real community builder. And I went up, and this is like my lighting disability was maybe like a year old at that point or something like that. And I went up, and I was talking, introducing my poem. I'm like, I haven't written about it before, but like I just wrote this poem. And and like I guess like now would be a good time to say identify as being disabled.
Yeah.
And the room erupted in like cheers. Right? And like, and I know a lot of the poets in there, and they're like some of the most kick-ass poets, like punk-ass poets I've ever had the pleasure of sharing space with. And to like, and in that moment I was like, oh, like I've been thinking about disability all wrong. Like I am in an elite group of incredible people, right? Like, and you don't have to be strong, you don't have to be all that sort of stuff, but like people who are outside of the binary of life, right? And I have to deal with ableism every day of their lives, and it's just, yeah, I wasn't proud of it until that happened. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to carry this with me. Like, I think about that, and I just,
Yeah.
very verklempt, because, yeah, it is our other pride.
Absolutely. And we
Yeah.
finally actually have, at least it's starting to be recognized, Disability Pride Month right after Queer Pride Month.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exciting to finally have that recognition that we can be proud of our disabilities, uh,
Hmm.
that they're an identity, that they're a community. So,
Yeah.
so much
Like, we
there.
got to learn how to get together and celebrate too. And I think
Exactly.
like that's such a good blueprint for celebrations for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat here today and for all of your brilliance,
Oh.
and just for being awesome. Like the conversation is so powerful and you've got so many great insights. So I thank you so much for your time.
I thank you, and I thank you for all the work you do and all the inspiration you give, and all the inclusiveness that you bring to the university as well. You're changing lives all the time, you. So I'm real proud to know you, and
I'm
I'm
proud to
always
know
in celebration with you.
you. Same here, my friend.
Yeah.